Welcome to the FMCG Guys, the podcast that dives into the innovation, strategy, and trends shaping consumer goods and retail in Europe and beyond.
Welcome to the FMCG Guys podcast, the top podcast in consumer goods and retail. I'm your host, Daniel Torres, and I'm accompanied by a very special guest host, and it's no other than Rob Nowell from our friends at Media Marketing. Hey, Rob, how are you?
Yeah, very good. Thanks for having me on my first podcast. Long-time listener. Yeah, it's great to be.
I even got nervous when I started the podcast, and we had to record it 3 times. So there you go.
Just me being a curse, I think.
Yeah, it must be that. You're never coming on again. But Rob, I know you very well since we connected last year at Shop Talk Europe. And we've basically, to the audience, if you've heard about our flagship event, Candid Commerce, it's basically a joint venture between the FMCG guys and Media Marketing. So it's an amazing partnership. But maybe you can tell us a bit more about what you do at Media Marketing and Media Marketing.
Yeah, sure. So, with Medium, it is kind of, the inception of it was kind of predicated on my career history. So for about just over a decade, I was working in the e-commerce analytics space. So kind of solution side. And I think certainly as we got around the COVID period, I could see how challenging it was for solution providers to actually have meaningful interactions with brands and retailers like Marco, who have got on today. And also, I think the brands and retailers were just sick and tired of 200-page white papers and stuffy roundtables. So, our business is all about bringing the community together. That's kind of our focus. We are the community agency. And yeah, I'm sure at some point during this chat, we'll talk a little bit about some of our plans for Shop Talk Europe, which involve a vineyard and a yacht. So lots to look forward to there.
And of course, our already famous kickoff party, which is where I met our guest today, who is no other than Marco Brucato, who's the head of eCommerce D2C EMEA Growth at Beko Europe. Hey, Marco, remember how we met?
Absolutely. Ciao, Danny, and hi, Rob. I'm super happy to be here today. I do remember how we met, actually. So
yeah, I don't know how you ended up in that party. I don't know if I found you on LinkedIn and invited you, or how that, or maybe didn't I invite somebody in your organization?
You invited my vice president. I should have came with him, actually, but he had an issue with his flight. He landed like 4 hours later, and so he couldn't join, and I was there alone. And so this is why we spent so much time together. That was great.
I'm glad he couldn't make it, because you and me since then have really taken it off, and it's been a great friendship, practically, I would say, by now. So, so I know that you'll be back in Barcelona in Shop Talk Europe this year as well, no?
Can't wait. It's going to be great. I mean, last year was the first time at the Shop Talk. It was amazing. I can't make it for the Vegas event, unfortunately, this year. But the Barcelona is a non-missable event, and I'm super happy to be there again. So yes, see you there again.
Yeah, I think, first of all, Marco, it'd be great to hear just a little bit about, your career as it is right now, but also where you've come from and kind of what shaped your current role.
Absolutely. So I will try to be very quick here. I just started in a small cheese company partially owned by my family, where I started before I got graduated, actually, for my bachelor.
I think worth saying as well, Marco, that you live in Milan now, but you're from Sicily. I think that
I do. I'm proudly from Sicily, but I live in Milan from 13 years now. So yeah, I'm already a Milanese now, but my blood is Sicilian, and so I can't separate from that. So I started there in a small family-owned, let's say, cheese factory. Worked there for 2 years and did a turnaround, relaunched the brand. It was great. I was super young, and it was an amazing experience. Then I decided to move to Milan and I started my master degree at Bocconi. And while I was still graduating there, I simply joined Heinz. At that time, it was simply Heinz, not Kraft Heinz. It became later Kraft Heinz. Started as an intern, normal career. Started in category management, then trade marketing, then key account management. And that is where I think some of the most important, let's say, changes of my career have happened. I was managing there, let's say I was managing 100 customers at that time, and as a key account manager. But one of those was a Chinese customer. And the funny story is that Kraft Heinz wasn't doing export from Italy, let's say, on a structured way at that time. But since one of my customers that was Italian, I mean, they were originally Chinese, but they were Italian. They were speaking Italian fluently. And when the general manager at that time said, okay, I need someone to start the business of export, we want to expand it, there's a huge opportunity in China, he thought to me just for that Chinese customer. And he said, okay, Marco already knows Chinese people. He's for sure, let's say, great for that role. And this is how I started my incredible path in the export area, where I stayed for 4 years. We structured a business unit, a real business unit with all the systems, pricing, contracts, customers. Been flying around the world for 4 years. It was an amazing job. I was taking 120 flights per year, and that the number it's insane. But that gives you the idea of how much we were going around. We structured the team and everything. Then after that, always due to China, I would say that, I mean, we in that time, we became a gold partner for Alibaba in China, because we were doing not much, but a good business there. And so, when the company wanted to create a European structure for e-commerce, they said, okay.
The same way that they put you in the export business, they put you in the e-commerce business, no?
That's the second turnaround, I would say. The company said, okay, let's find out who has already experience in e-commerce. And let's say, luckily, I was one of those names, and I got, and I got this amazing opportunity in e-commerce, where I started in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam, as a central role to create, let's say, the expertise and the knowledge across the area for e-commerce. After that, I moved back to Italy, into as head of e-commerce for the Italian business unit, where I stayed for 2-3 years, I would say. And after that, I moved into Whirlpool, that now, well, the formerly Whirlpool, now is Beko Europe, because we got merged between Whirlpool and Beko in April 2024. And I'm leading now, I'm head of the D2C e-commerce transformation for the European zone. What does it mean? It's a very long title.
It's a very long title.
It is. It actually means much less, because actually I'm leading the business.
That's very modest of you, Marco.
No, that's true. So I do lead the business side of the direct to consumer business. That means that with my team, we do drive all the business projects that are not technical projects. So the team is split into, there is this business side and the technical side. I'm leading the business side. And so, yes, we are presenting 7 countries across Europe. We have 27 active websites at this moment across Europe. A nice business, a very different business from the one that we were leading in Kraft Heinz, I would say. So going from ketchup and baby food to dishwashers is not exactly the same, but yeah, but it's cool. It's very nice. And I love this, let's say this role is giving me a lot of opportunity of seeing D2C from a different perspective, from a leading brand with a leading position on the D2C market. So it's a great opportunity.
Yeah, which we'll go into later, but let's stop a minute in Kraft Heinz, because I know that one thing that you did there, which I think the audience will be very interested in, that you ran DTC in Kraft Heinz. So you ran DTC and FMCG and it seemed like it worked. So what were you doing in that space?
Yeah, it was working actually. It was miraculously working, but yes. So, it's always a very tough choice there, to, do D2C. What we were doing was leading, mainly, so the major business on D2C was the, baby food business. That was the, so it was based on a leading brand in Italy that we found a way to launch on D2C. Just talking about the Italian environment. Okay?
Yeah.
Then there were more, and we were, let's say, fully involved. But in the Italian environment, that was the major one. Yes, it's not easy. It's not easy. And you gotta find the right value proposition for it to make it work. Usually, all the FMCGs are very scared about this choice, and they have to be, because D2C is a costly environment. It's and it's something that if you don't have a strategic idea of how to place it and what to expect from it, you're gonna be very disappointed from that. So D2C must have a clear purpose and a clear scope to take inside the total strategy of the company. But it's part of the total strategy of the company, and it has to be like that.
Interesting. And Marco, one of the things that I was really interested in was obviously the transformation part of your job title. I was interested, is that transformation in terms of how it's transforming the market generally, or more specifically in Beko at the moment?
No, so transformation is the name that we wanted to give to the business unit, because it's we do lead transformational projects in terms of high impact projects to the market. So we do deliver, just for as an example, today we are developing a elasticity tool that helps every single market to well price all our SKUs. This is a super insightful tool, for example, and it's part of the business, let's say, side. Let me say, we have tens and tens of projects open at this stage, but just to mention one. When you have to decide a marketplace strategy for the European zone, that's where my team gets in. Where you have to reshuffle big parts of the direct-to-consumer business, that's where my team brings in. Apart from the normal, let's say, business, not management, but help and support that we do provide as a center of excellence to the markets.
Got it. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And I've got literally a list of questions here for you today. But my main one is just understanding a little bit around, the general strategy around the D2C side. I think, in the UK market, when I think about the vast majority of the main products that you guys sell, I think I would always go kind of retailer first, and probably through convenience, something like an Amazon. I'm interested to know kind of, what is the main kind of push behind the D2C side? What are you looking to achieve? How do you differentiate between the retailer proposition?
So, without going into, let's say, in any detail about the UK, let's say, market, what I would love to say here is that there must be a value proposition behind the D2C. There must be a value proposition, and and as I was saying before, when I say it should be part of a strategy, it means that D2C is part of I would say, not just of the conversion side, it's part of the awareness and consideration steps. So being there, having a D2C, doesn't just allow the brand to sell online, but allows the brand to be visible in the second biggest digital shelf that you have. The first digital shelf is Amazon. We all know it. 50% of the traffic goes there whenever anyone, including the three of us, needs a product. 50% of the times we go directly to Amazon. So that is the biggest digital shelf. You gotta be there. You gotta be there, and you gotta have a consistent share of shelf. Yep. Then there is Google, that has yet the 32% of the total market. To be present on that digital shelf, You must have a strategy. To be able to steer on that digital shelf and to control it, you need a D2C, because you need to invest on SEO and paid media to make sure that your products are fully visible there. So, and I'm not talking about selling the products. I'm talking about visibility. Okay. And that is something that every brand, whenever is approaching D2C, should consider, because D2C can be helpful for, yes, for sure, for selling, but also for price positioning, but also for showing the unique features of your products and make those visible from the second biggest digital shelf.
So in some way, it's a way, like if you see it on Amazon as well, I guess, that if you have a DTC, like if you have your own website with allows you to go more deeply into the product, it's a good way for the consumer to inform themselves before making that purchase, no?
Definitely. But also, if you think about a journey that doesn't include Amazon, because not all the consumers shops on Amazon, okay? We tend to think that it's like that. If you're not going to go on Amazon, how do I catch you? How do I gain the interest from you on my product? I need to be visible. And so you're probably going to go on Google looking for best washing machine or washing machine, whatever. If you want to consider my products, I need to be there. And to be there, I don't just need to be presenting the retailers, let's say, in the retailer's website, but to control the presence there, you also need to have a D2C. So it helps the total strategy of the company. Not for selling, again. It's for making your products visible to the consumers.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the strategy, it's the awareness, and it's the governance, I guess, as well. I know that working with other consumer electronics brands.
And is there any difference in the way that you assemble a DTC
higher ticket items, how those SKUs
for large-appliances
on those
versus FMCG?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Definitely. So, I mean, the journey is completely different. You got to think that on D2C for FMCG, you can have a purchase every 2 weeks or every month. On appliances, I would love to have a purchase from the same consumer every month, but it's quite, let's say, unusual to buy every month a washing machine and then find at the end of the year 12 in your home. So it's not like that. The journey takes much more time. Let's assume that a consumer needs the same appliance every 10 years, let's say, more or less. So how do you make sure that you are not just proposing to your consumer that piece, but also other appliances that he could need in another moment? How do you take accessories? How do you advertise your new features, simply the new features? Because there's a part of the consumers 50% of the consumers, whenever they buy a new appliance, it's because it's broken. So you need it. Then there's another 50% that is split into 25% more or less are consumers that are changing their home, and so they take the occasion just to change and renew their appliances. And then there's another 25% that is changing appliances just because their appliance is not broken, but doesn't have the features that they do expect. Okay. That part is very important. What are the features that you do expect? How can I help you in identifying features that your actual appliance doesn't have? Okay. And so, as you can imagine, from a FMCG brand that has a repeated purchase where you need other leverages, you need to drive convenience. But convenience doesn't mean just price. Means I give you tools to use my products. I give you help. Okay. And that is something that is applicable everywhere. To a purchase where the path lasts 10 years. Whenever you need it, you purchase in approximately 1 month from the need. And so it's very different. It's very different. So the journey changes. And so whatever you propose has to be fully adapted to that journey.
Yeah. Are you seeing a lot of the eco side of things now, both for the environment and economical, driving a lot of those journeys? I know we actually had someone round to look at our dryer the other day, and the guy couldn't actually believe that we had this dryer because it's been in my family. Well, it's about the same age that I am. I'm actually aging better than I am. So he was like, look, if you want to save some money, you need to get a new. I didn't even consider this. And how much are you kind of picking up on the fact that like someone like me that's not very into the know-how of appliances, it's just going to go straight into Google and say eco-friendly,
we can talk about things
dry. I guess a big part of the D2C side of the business is catering to that, right?
Overview on this topic, but let me say that for sure it's one of the major drivers for the consumers. And this is also why we know and we believe that showcasing what is also the benefit that the consumer could have in moving to an old appliance to a new one would mean in terms of annual savings, because we never have to forget that whenever you move of many classes of energy efficiency, you can actually, let's say, pay back your appliance quite fast. Okay. So yes. And an interesting thing here is how you get these data and how you, let's say, then help also the marketing teams in understanding what the consumer is looking for. And here D2C has a huge part, I would say, because you have first party data. And when I say I hate saying first party data because it means nothing, but it means actually a lot of things. Because when you mean first party data, I mean, for example, that you know exactly what has been typed on the search bar. Exactly. And you can do a lot of stats there. You can know what has been asked on average to your shopping assistant, digital and physical, because we have the both. We have physical, so real assistants and AI-driven shopping assistant. And that helps you in understanding what are the needs of the consumer. And that has to be an input. It has to be an input to become a better offering and a better convenient, as I always say, but not in terms of pricing, but in terms of how do I go after the needs of my consumers, because that is the only way that a D2C has to exist. You gotta go after the consumer's needs, place yourself well, and continue refining your offering based on the changing needs of the consumers. Consumers change quite fast in all the categories, I would say.
Why would you say then, given that this data can clearly be a competitive advantage, why would you say that, especially since you've been successful in it, that FMCGs are still shy about direct to consumer?
So I think that finding the right value proposition is one of the hardest things you can do. Because if, let's say, I always do an example for a pasta maker. Okay, it's hard to find the right value proposition of a pasta maker. If not, I give you a ton of pasta at a good price, because there the logistic cost is simply very high. So, and it has a super high weight on the total value of the order. So finding for each and being creative in each industry to find. And one of the best examples that I have here, and I had and I always talk about this example because it's really a benchmark for me, is what M&M's did. M&M's probably did one of the greatest things, I would say, in terms of D2C, because they found a way to personalize their item for whatever the consumer wanted. So having a picture, and I print it on every single M&M that you want to buy from me. I mean, that is a unique selling proposition. And that is not obvious. They had simple candies. Okay. How do you build on that? How do you get to, okay, I print on every single M&M the picture or a logo or a letter that the consumer wants. So it's not I do sell what I have, but it's I create an entirely new value proposition. If the products that I have are perceived or doesn't have that much value. For example, in the baby food world, what we did was to try to find was to try to integrate our D2C in the real consumer journey of a mom. So a mom, whenever she needs to start weaning the baby, she doesn't know how to do it. She has, of course, the fear also of doing that. And having someone that is not just a pediatrician that can help her in that journey is well welcomed. Okay. And so we try to get ourselves there, giving her menus, giving her, okay, this is what we believe could be the right things to give to your baby at this age stage. Here's the menus. Here's what you could, here's what, let's say, all the recipes for all the days. Just do it. It's like a HelloFresh, let's say, way of if I want to make comparisons, but improper ones. But yeah, so, and that was working. That was working because that is the way that you try to find ways to get closer to your consumers, giving them what? Giving them convenience, a kind of convenience.
It's really interesting. I mean, one of the things that I was thinking about prior to this was around what that aftercare looked like, because one of the things that I just don't really know about is what does the typical data variance look like between a third-party purchase versus first-party? You know, I know that about a decade ago, I used to work a lot with some of the big printing companies, the HPs and Okies of the world. And I think they'd always try and drive people to register so they could get that aftercare, so they know when maintenance and things like that were coming up. But I guess that's can't really be fully enforced, right? So surely if it's a first party purchase, you guys have got that as a base level for everyone, versus third party, it's going to be more difficult to do that proper customer lifestyle marketing.
No, let's say on first party. So whenever a consumer purchases on your D2C, they do have the option to opt in. And so to become a community member, we always call it a community member. And if it goes through a third party, the only way that you have to catch your consumers again after the purchase, because you don't have any data, even though you're shipping to them, you don't have any other data and you cannot, they didn't give you any opt-in. So you're not allowed to communicate to them. But then if they want to register the appliance, in this case, for example, that is the way that we can try to reconnect with them in a second moment. So giving them benefits in registering the appliance. Why do we give a benefit? Because it has a value. So having, let's say, knowing our consumers will help us in improving our products, will help us in improving how we communicate to them. And knowing them every day better is one of the scopes, I would say, of the D2C. Let's say, what I always say is that D2C is based on three pillars, always based on three pillars. It's for sure sales. It's for sure marketing. You got to show up your products in the best way. Okay. They have to shine. But then the third pillar and the three together are a one and only, let's say, thing to take is data. Okay. If you don't take the three pillars together, you're not having a D2C. And data means exactly what you were saying, is having more and more data to analyze, to study, to know better your consumers, and to fuel other parts of the company. Okay. So D2C is a data generator for the rest of the company. The bigger it is, the better the data becomes. And that is what, let's say, what a company should be should be trying to do, in my opinion.
And then I know that linked to this, you also have like the three principles of scale, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I always say to my team. So let's say this is something that in Craft Times is quite usual, that is quite common, but we have to test small and scale fast. And that is the real principle. I always say to them, they have to test small and they have to fail. I want to see my team failing. I want to see my team doing errors, because only if they challenge themselves, only if they really do things out of their comfort zone, we can evolve. And especially in a transformation business unit, that is crucial. That is really crucial. So challenging the teams in being more to think louder, okay? And to, let's say, okay, you have doubt, good, test it, find a small control environment, fully data-driven. Let's decide if it worked, and then let's scale it fast, or let's kill it if it didn't work, or refine it if we believe that making a refinement could help. That is the best way, I believe, in a let's say fast-paced environment.
I have a question, because like I think that the whole, going back to the DTC part, like the whole DTC conversation in FMCG is a great way to get data. I think it's been like it disappeared at the same time that retail media has emerged, and seemingly it's the most pragmatic way of FMCGs or brands in general to get data in general. Because, everybody shops in the retailer, so we'll just get the data from the retailer. What do you think?
I think that retailer data is important, and it has to be part of the strategy as well as as D2C. You will never get from the retailer the data that you will get from D2C. No way. Because on D2C, you can know how the shoppers are shopping, what are their requests, how to actually then propose your products in a better way. Retailers will never help you. I mean, maybe there is someone who does it, but in general, let's talk in general, of course. Data that will be provided there are very different. And you cannot interpolate the data as you want. Okay, so creating a one and only source of data is a must, and that's exactly what we've been doing here. For example, is to merge all the data together to be sure that we're not missing pieces and we're analyzing the full picture. So retail media, yes, has to be there. It's a super important topic. It's a super important pillar of any brand strategy, but it's part of it, and can be complemented to better data, much more detailed, that can be driven by a D2C. It's a corporate strategy. The company needs to believe in that. And this is also why it's not always easy to make a D2C happen, right? Because the entire company has to believe it. From the top, you must have the buy-in. And then you need to execute. And that's the only way. If the top management doesn't believe in a project like that, there's no way it's ever going to happen.
Interesting. Very interesting. And coming back to your kind of test small, scale fast, I feel like this wouldn't be a 2025 podcast if we didn't bring up AI. So, I was actually blown away. I was in the offices of a very large alcohol brand the other day, and they're going through, there's actually like a whole transformation team that's, got a center of excellence with all different department heads. And what they're doing with AI around content is unbelievable. And the percentage efficiency that it's creating is madness. However, they made a really interesting point that actually, even though that it might, really alleviate some resource constraints on, producing content, actually it's kind of created not a problem, but something else here where it's like, more around the governance. How do you governance that, content created by AI at scale? And I was just wondering like how much, I don't know how much you can go into it, but be interesting to know kind of how you guys are approaching AI and the impact it's having.
So yes, we are approaching AI almost in every topic that we bring to the table, actually, every single day. The elasticity that I was talking to you before was fully driven through AI, just to do a very quick example. Okay. So look, we have mapped inside the D2C our way of looking to AI. So how we are using every pillar, looking at let's say it's a kind of quite normal, let's say, classification through what is the degree of impact to the consumer and the complexity of that on the X. We've been mapping all of that. And on contents, there are three major that I would mention that we are tackling today. First is the one that you were saying, contents on PDP. So product detail information, bullet points, optimized titles, optimized short description, long description, whatever there. Everything that is text is easy. Okay. But based on that, so it's easy and can be done from the AI. The second big pillar for the contents is the articles. How can you scale AI to create articles that are relevant? Because you should not allow AI to publish articles that are not relevant, right? So there is a process here, and there is a way to do that in the full compliance way. Okay, integrating, let's say, whatever AI model that you want to integrate to do that helps a lot. And the third pillar is images. Okay, all the images. AI can reshuffle whatever image that you want. On the three pillars together, there is a basic level of how do I make sure that the AI is not saying anything wrong, is not giving any wrong information. So AI, yes, but then the human control must be there. Every single content at the end has to be checked. There's no way that the AI can, you can set up a good model, okay, and you can lower down the risk to a 0 point something. But that point something, it's something. You cannot afford it as a brand. And so whatever has to be controlled from a human being. So AI, it's a huge tool. We are, as I was saying, we are studying it and we are enrolling it, and we have enrolled it everywhere. Chat assistant, just to give one example I was mentioning before as well. Forecasting, whatever. AI is everywhere and should be everywhere, and is helping us in evolving very fast. But it has to be very well controlled, because it's not yet, let's say, as safe as a human. Or anyway, the combination with AI and a human can create a much higher level of safety.
Yeah. I love that, by the way. That point something is still something. I'm definitely stealing that quote for my own.
Quote of the day. We could even use it for the title. I'm curious to know as well, Marco, because you've managed export business, you've run e-com, which at the end is always like a bit of a fringe type of business. It's fast growing, but a small percentage. So how do you convince your CFO to give your colleagues and your senior stakeholders to give you resources? What advice can you give the other listeners that are in?
Yeah, that's a very nice question, actually. So, what I tend to do whenever I want to present something that I know is it's something new for the audience, let's say, that is something that happens quite often.
Yeah, because apart from being like a minority, it's also that's the cool thing about being in e-com, that everything is new continuously.
Exactly. So, since the audience, it's for sure, let's say, skilled enough to understand why. Of course, it must make sense whatever you are suggesting. But if it really makes sense, you gotta explain it. And explaining it doesn't mean I explain you the topic, but I explain you the basics of the topic. I explain you the opportunity in terms of, I start from the market. I start from why should we focus on that? Why should it be a priority? Because it's not a priority for Marco. It's a priority for the company. It has to be a priority. So if it's something that I believe there is the right choice for the company, I try to give the same information that I have used to base my decisions on, to the audience, to the stakeholders. Of course, whenever it's a senior position, you need to be very quick and you need to be very, 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 let's say, very fast in expressing yourself and showcasing really the real center of the discussion, but you got to explain the basics. So you have to show why. Okay, you have to show what are the thoughts behind. If you agree on the thoughts behind, then the rest comes with, let's say, by itself. So the solution of that issue, let me say, is automatic. So explain the issue very well. Explain why you believe that is a great opportunity for the company. And then the solution, it will come by itself. That is the only way that I always say to my team, because because everyone here is to do the best for the company. Okay, everyone. So if you want to be heard, make sure that they understand you.
Yeah. Totally. So it's a mix of like explaining it so they can understand, but it's also maybe sometimes when we want to bring our point of view to people, we try to think of too much, overcomplicating it, of how they will perceive the benefit and so on. But sometimes it's as simple as like, okay, if I'm convinced myself that I want to take this action, just explain the reasons that have convinced me, no?
Exactly. That's it. And this is exactly what what I've learned in a negotiation course that I did many years ago. And I mean, negotiation happens, let's say, just after that you've been agreeing that there's a need. Okay. So then the details of whatever we're discussing, of how I thought the solution of the problem, I'm happy to discuss it. But we must agree on the problem. We must agree on the problem. So on the basics. Once we agree on the problem, whatever solution to that problem will be a solution. Okay. But that problem has to be crystal clear. So I always spend most of the time to prepare my deck on the problem rather than on the solution.
Interesting. I like the fact of problem and then negotiation. It's a really good approach. So Marco, this wouldn't be an FMCG Guys podcast episode if it didn't have our last famous question, which is, with everything that you've learned in your career, if you went back to yourself as you were in Sicily when you were young and you could give yourself one piece of advice, what would that be?
So I think that to me, the most applicable one is trust your leaders, and whenever there's someone that is caring about you, trust him or trust her, and it will pay off. All the changes that I did in my career were something that I didn't want to do, because I wasn't believing that it was the right choice. But then I had the right people telling me that was the right choice for me and for my future. And they convinced me to do it. So I would force myself more to say, yes, I do it.
Awesome. Well, Rob and I will try to get some takeaways of this conversation. I saw that Rob was taking copious notes as we were going, so I'll let you go for it, Rob. What are your key takeaways from this conversation?
I think definitely, I've literally got it on my, not that I'm trying to plug Remarkable. I've literally bolded the point, something is still something. I think, for me, speaking with Marco and lots of other leaders at the moment, I think that there's definitely a sentiment in the market that change is necessary. And I think even maybe the kind of old guard that have been historically more resistant to change are now seeing that actually change is a bigger risk than no change. So I think it's super interesting to hear, Marco, how you guys are doing it in a fast but controlled way. And for me, lots of learnings there around, actually the importance of D2C, but not just as a sales channel, but, that kind of broader strategic piece. And I think certainly, in something that is more of a complex sale, very competitive, complex sale, consumer electronics and white goods, and the importance of that. So yeah, a few thoughts from me there, Daniel. I don't know if you want to add a few more.
Totally. I mean, I think that you made a very good advocacy, if you like, for DTC and FMCG, that it can actually work. And actually, if you have the right why and the right reason for it and the right positioning, which is easier said than done, but it can actually serve a great purpose. You gave your own Kraft Heinz example around like focusing and around maternity. You said the M&M's example about like hyper personalization, which was very good. And yeah, I think it's something that as brands look for ways of being relevant, which I think is now the biggest challenge for FMCG brands, this is one of the good tools they can make use of, especially if they want to explain more what their brand is all about. Also, yeah, I like the fact that you broke down the digital shelf into two. You said Amazon and then Google. So the Google piece is very important, but for example, I use Google a lot. So as well as Amazon, but Google I do use a lot. And it's a great way really to get to know a brand ultimately.
Yeah, definitely.
I think the only other thing I was going to say as well for me is that kind of last point you made there about trust, Marco. I think at the minute, it has been for like the last few years, there is so much transformation. And I think with how everything is kind of bleeding together across omnichannel, and I think even the word e-commerce seems to be phasing out in favor of just broader commerce, right? And I think that the negotiation piece around kind of starting with the problem versus the solution is a great way to look at it, because what I would say we do see a lot of in some of the more traditional institutions in the FMCG space is that big resistance to change. So I think for leaders in your role, I think that's a key thing to bear in mind is kind of, how to garner that trust and isolate the problem.
Yeah. So there's a lot more that we could go over. I think that you gave some good advice on how to make e-commerce work, sales, marketing, and data, the scale. Well, you kind of referred to it in terms of stay small, scale fast. So if anyone wants to re-listen to it, obviously more than welcome to. Marco, it was a pleasure to have you. It was a lot of fun. So thanks so much. And I'll see you soon. If not before, I'll see you in Barcelona latest in June.
Grazie, Daniel. And thanks, Rob. It was a real pleasure to talk to you today. More than happy to see you whenever you want and wherever you want.
Don't worry, the FMCG guys jet is going to pick you up soon. Don't worry.
Great, I'm waiting for it.
Rob, how did you feel about your debut as a co-host?
Well, you guys can tell me. It's the first time I've ever done it, so hopefully it was all right.
Yeah, I think we'll see you around here again soon. So I think you did fine. You did well. Excellent. Well, thanks, guys, and thanks to our audience for tuning in again. And we'll see you in the next episode of the FMCG guys. Have a great day.
Ciao.